Meeting will come to order. We have a number of items on the agenda today. First, voting on the nominations of Kristen Clark to be Assistant Attorney General for the Civil Rights Division, Todd Kim to serve as Assistant Attorney General for Environment, Natural Resources. Then we'll turn to the legislative agenda, starting with S-228, the Klobuchar-Grassley Merger Filing Fee Modernization Act. We also have added to the agenda, as is the tradition in this committee, 3 bipartisan bills to help mark Police Week and honor the brave men and women who are serving in law enforcement, S-1511, 921, and 1502. Each of these bills is bipartisan. I've listed them on the agenda in consultation with my Republican colleagues. It's my hope we'll be able to conclude today's markup by advancing these bills out of the committee in a bipartisan fashion. Finally, we have 5 nominees who are listed for the first time today. Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson to serve on the D.C. Circuit, Candace Jackson Akumi to serve on the 7th Circuit, Julian Niels on the District of New Jersey, Judge Zahid Qureshi to the District of New Jersey, Regina Rodriguez on the District of Colorado. We will follow the standard practice that my Republican predecessors followed. We will first discuss and vote on the nominees and then turn to the bills. I know there's been a great deal of interest in discussing Ms. Clark's nomination, but I think most of the thoughts have been expressed in her hearing. I won't go through all of them today, but I will make it clear that anyone who wants to speak on Ms. Clark's nomination will have the opportunity to do so. I would ask all members, out of respect to their fellow members, to confine their remarks to 10 minutes or less so that we can all have a chance to speak in light of the fact that there is a roll call vote later this morning on the floor. I will adhere to the same standard myself. Ms. Clark has the breadth and depth of civil rights experience needed to revitalize the Civil Rights Division at this critical time. She's a veteran of the division's sections, having served as trial attorney in the voting section and prosecutor in the criminal section during George W. Bush's administration. Ms. Clark has also led the NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund's Historic Political Participation Group. She led the New York State Attorney General's Civil Rights Bureau and its nascent Religious Liberty Initiative. She has led another of the nation's preeminent civil rights organizations, the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under the Law, through a period of innovation in tackling some of the most difficult civil rights challenges, including confronting the white supremacist hate crimes and online hate. Ms. Clark has demonstrated expertise and commitment to faithfully executing the law in all of these roles. She has earned the support from 5 former Assistant Attorney Generals of the Civil Rights Division of both political parties. Her nomination is also supported by a bipartisan group of 59 former senior DOJ officials and U.S. attorneys and over 70 former state attorneys general, again, on a bipartisan basis. Throughout her 20-year legal career, Ms. Clark has forged relationships with federal, state, and local law enforcement, demonstrated by her strong support by the major cities' chiefs, the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement, Women in Federal Law Enforcement, the Hispanic American Police Commanders, our over 40 prominent police chiefs and Sheriff David Mahoney, who this month stepped down as president of the National Sheriff's Association. She has experience as a federal prosecutor, long-standing ties to law enforcement. She's uniquely positioned to take this assignment of leadership. There have been many claims that have been raised against her. I think most of them are not grounded in fact, and many are an exaggeration. There's no point in relitigating all those at this moment, although I'll be prepared to use any remaining time to return to them. Are we running the clock, is it? The clock started and then stopped. The 5 judicial nominees on the agenda will be held over. I mentioned earlier a 10-minute limit to my remarks, and the clock was running at the time. Now it started over, so I'm going to make these remarks very brief. I do want to say a word about Todd Kim. He is a leader in experienced and award-winning appellate litigator with significant expertise in environment and natural resources law. He began his career as a nonpartisan career lawyer at ENRD, worked for Democratic and Republican presidents, most of the time under the George W. Bush administration. A large number of environmental law experts who don't often agree on much all agree that Mr. Kim's the right person for this job. In addition, he has the support of former senior ENRD officials from both parties who have said that it's strong belief that he's supremely qualified for this position. He served as District of Columbia's first Solicitor General for over a decade. He's worked on cases with state attorneys general and solicitors general and has a deep knowledge base of the subject. I apologize. Now the clock is running. It appears that I used somewhere less than 6 minutes in my opening statement. I'll turn to Ranking Member Grassley.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for saying that the bills or the judges are held over. We also have S-228, the Merger Filing Fee Modernization Act, which Senator Klobuchar and I have sponsored, and 3 bills for Police Week. I'll have more comments on the judicial nominees next week when we finish holding them, but I'd like to address Todd Kim and Kristen Clark. I'll be voting for Tom Kim to head the Environment Division. I don't think I agree with him on the issues that the administration might be promoting, but still think that he's well qualified to run environmental enforcement at the Justice Department. He won't be making any policy. He will be enforcing the law, and I trust he'll do so in a fair and even-handed way. I won't be supporting Kristen Clark to run Civil Rights Division. Ms. Clark is a good attorney. I believe that she continues, the disturbing trend of highly politicized nominees to the Justice Department under President Biden. While I disagree with her strongly on some of her views, especially when it comes to defunding the police and her activist activities in college and law school, that disagreement alone doesn't explain my no vote. The Justice Department and even the Civil Rights Division needs to be committed to impartial and equal justice to all. In the wrong hands, it's a division that can be used to target the president's political opponents like law enforcement, school choice advocates, religious schools, red states, and pro-lifers. Our civil rights laws are broad, and even the threat of their enforcement chills legitimate political opposition. Unfortunately, Ms. Clark is a partisan. She opposed the enforcement of voting rights laws against Ike Brown, either because of the color of his skin or because of his political party. Neither answer is acceptable. She has disparaged religious freedom groups, Supreme Court decisions protecting religious liberty, individual Supreme Court justices, and some of my colleagues on Twitter. She has held Republican nominees to standards that she doesn't want to apply to herself. Many of my colleagues have also expressed concern about Ms. Clark's candor in answering our questions. To an extent, I share this concern. I asked Ms. Clark whether Jamal, the country's most notorious cop killer, was a political prisoner. She wouldn't answer, telling me that she was unfamiliar with his case. Given her youthful activism, I find that very hard to believe. To paraphrase a colleague of mine, there has to be a less partisan, more candidate nominee to lead the Civil Rights Division. So unfortunately, I'm a no on Ms. Clark. The Klobuchar-Grassley FTC bill will help boost enforcement resources for the Justice Department Antitrust Division and FTC. The bill adjusts merger filing fees so that fees would be shouldered by larger transactions in more equitable ways. I hope that my colleagues will support the bill. Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for holding a Police Week markup. Every year at this time, we get the opportunity to show our appreciation to America's law enforcement community for the work that they do keeping us safe. Today, we'll be marking up 3 police bills for Police Week. I'm proud to co-sponsor all of them. One of those bills, the Confidential Opportunity for Peer Support Counseling Act. The bill protects information shared by law enforcement officers during their peer support counseling sessions. Protecting America's First Responders Act bill ensures that fallen and severely disabled public safety officers get compensation they're entitled to under the Public Safety Officers Benefit Program. We also have Senator Cornyn's bill, the Jaime Zapata and Victoria Avila Federal Officers and Employees Protection Act, which many of us have co-sponsored. That bill lets courts across the country know that they have jurisdiction over criminals who kill U.S. law enforcement officers overseas. Some federal courts have understood this to be the law already, but not all of them. The bill makes Congress's intention very clear to protect federal officers. I do want to say that the police officers are suffering from not only violent attacks directed at them because of the uniforms they wear, but also demoralization and fatigue. Over the last year, police officers began quitting the force in large numbers, and most police departments are struggling to attract enough applicants to fill the vacancies. I worry that more and more police officers won't want to do the job, and I worry that more and more young adults won't want to start careers in law enforcement. We need more qualified people who want to help police officers. It's nice to work in a bipartisan way during Police Week for officers. The past year has been difficult, very difficult one for them, and their services have been instrumental in protecting our communities during what has been a very trying time for all of us. I yield.
Mr. President, or Mr. Chairman.
Just one moment, Senator Kennedy. I want to acknowledge that Senator Grassley used 6 minutes. It's a Midwestern thing. I appreciate very much. And we are going to entertain the nominations at this point. And Senator Kennedy, if that is your purpose for seeking...
It's a 30-second personal privilege.
You're certainly entitled
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if this may be irregular, and you can tell me to hush, but I just wanted the committee to be aware. I think we work pretty well together, and Senator Klobuchar's father passed away, and I've heard her speak of him often in this committee. He apparently was quite a gentleman, and I've lost my mom and dad, and it hurts no matter where you are in life or how ready you think you are. You're never ready. And I just want to make folks aware of that and tell Amy I'm sorry.
Thank you very much, Senator Kennedy, and thank you to everyone that's mentioned. He loved his life, and he led it with zest until he was 93 years old and got to report on the entire world, politics, sports, covered the Vikings. And when he died, as we think about our jobs, he had the U.S. Senate blanket that I'd gotten him in the gift shop on him. So it meant a lot that this place, and I think we should think about that of what our government means to people, and it meant a lot to him. So thank you.
Senator Klobuchar, of course, we all joined Senator Kennedy in the sentiments that he expressed. We had a moment to discuss her father before the meeting. We won't repeat many of his greatest quotes, but I had the real honor of meeting him, and you have some wonderful, wonderful stories of your times together, so the sentiment is bipartisan.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question, please?
Oh, Senator Cornyn, sure.
Will we be permitted to speak on the nominees before we vote on them?
Yes, of
Okay,
course.
thank you.
As a matter of fact, Senator Leahy?
Mr. Chairman, and I think last night and again this morning, the number of senators coming to Senator Klobuchar, senators of both parties, expressing their condolences. And Marcel and I were talking last night about this. And I remember when you and your family were at our old farmhouse in Vermont, and you had told some great stories about your dad and the obvious affection. And those of us who lost parents know it hurts, but eventually the good memories come back. And I know you have the photographs to do some of that. And I'm thinking also, I'm not going to repeat some of the stories, but Mr. Chairman, this is National Police Week, and we're not doing the usual in-person things we do, but I'm glad the committee's taken up bipartisan bills to help honor and assist our law enforcement officers. I proudly support all three of these bipartisan bills. And this committee has done a lot. I remember back years ago when Senator Ben Nighthorse Campbell, a Republican from Colorado, and I joined to start the Bulletproof Vest program. And it was one of my Republican colleagues who a couple of years ago renamed it and made it permanent, renamed it the Patrick Leahy Bulletproof Vest Partnership. And I'm proud of the program. It's awarded more than 13,000 jurisdictions, a total of $522 million in federal funds, 1.5 million vests. And you may recall when we were reauthorizing it one year, Mr. Chairman, we had a police officer who testified before us. He had his family, he's from Pennsylvania, he had his family lined up behind him, mother, father, wife, his children. He talked about making a routine stop. He got out of the car, and the man in the car in front of him got out, shot him twice. And he said that my two loves in life were police work and my family. And he reached down under the table and pulled up his bulletproof vest. And you could see the two 10-millimeter slugs stuck in the vest. And he said, I got a couple cracked ribs, and they apprehended the guy that shot him. And when I was being treated at the hospital there for a few hours, I saw my parents, my wife, and my children. And he said, I don't take partisan positions, but I would certainly hope everybody reauthorize this program. It was reauthorized unanimously after that. And I look at the two eminently qualified nominees for senior positions in the Justice Department, Kristen Clark and Todd Kim. I worry that some think that Ms. Clark is anti-law enforcement. That's not the case. I look at these very closely, having spent years of my life in law enforcement. She spent more than half her legal career working in law enforcement as a prosecutor. And so I think we should be celebrating people like this who've done so much for law enforcement. Now I'll yield back the rest of my time.
Thank you, Senator Leahy. We're going to address the nominations first. We'll do it alternatively, Democrat, Republican, and ask members to respect one another in the time that they use. Senator Cornyn, were you seeking recognition?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I wanted to address the nomination of Kristen Clark. I have, as the chairman knows, supported most of President Biden's nominees for a variety of posts. In the Justice Department, I supported Ms. Monaco, the Deputy Attorney General, as well as the Attorney General himself, Judge Merrick Garland. And while I disagree with some of their policy positions, and I'm confident I will disagree with some of their future decisions, they both showed a commitment to public service and had the experience to lead the department, and critically, have the temperament and ethical compass to do the job. To state it differently, they've not spent their careers engaged in partisan culture wars and attempting to undermine the police. I could not say the same for Vanita Gupta, who unfortunately was confirmed by the thinnest of margins to Associate Attorney General, and now I find myself unable to say the same for the Civil Rights Division nominee, Kristen Clark. Ms. Clark is a partisan culture warrior who's openly advocated the defunding of the police. In an op-ed she wrote entitled, quote, "I prosecuted police killings, defund the police, but be strategic." While this is a troubling position, what is equally troubling is her refusal to admit that she's advocated for this position. This is very similar to what Ms. Gupta did in lying about her previous position. As I said with Ms. Gupta, I can understand how people's opinions and will evolve over time. There are positions I've taken in the past I'm sure I've changed on, but to outright deny the facts is very troubling, and unfortunately getting to be a trend in these confirmation proceedings. Someone who cannot own up to their public position should not be given the tools and levers of the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department. Somebody who refuses to be candid with the committee should not be in charge of supervising lawyers who are required to be ethical in their appearances before courts of law. Her record is extremely troubling, and I'm concerned that she will weaponize the tools of the Civil Rights Division, including pattern and practice investigations, search warrants, and criminal indictments, to do what she said she wanted to do back in 2020, which is defund the police. Finally, Mr. Chairman, I want to just make a brief comment about some of the legislative efforts to overrule the Shelby County case involving the Voting Rights Act. As you know, the Supreme Court held the Voting Rights Act provision, which refused to update the factual basis for the Voting Rights Act passage to the current times. Indeed, it acted as if the Voting Rights Act had never been passed and implemented, and I believe the Voting Rights Act has been one of the most successful pieces of legislation that Congress has ever considered and passed, and I think it's something we should be proud of. But unfortunately, now there is an effort afoot to try to do through the back door what is currently being attempted with S1 and HR1 through the front door, which is to have the federal government to take over elections across the country. Indeed, the requirement that all election law changes in the states be pre-cleared through a increasingly partisan Justice Department process would, I think, accomplish this federal takeover of our elections, much as the attempt to do it through the front door is being done through S1 and HR1. So, and I know that Ms. Clark, if she's confirmed, as she probably will be, unfortunately, without my support, will be integral to that process. And based on her previous activities and clearly stated positions, I believe that she will not be first and foremost dedicated to the impartial administration of justice, but rather a partisan culture war. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cornyn. Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you very much, Chairman Durbin. And Senator Cornyn and I have worked together on a lot of things and have successfully passed a number of bills, including in the criminal justice area, but we disagree on this one. I think that Kristen Clark is going to be great in this job, and that's because I've seen her in action. As chair of the Rules Committee, which has jurisdiction over federal elections, I've seen her stand up for rights of all Americans. I saw how she was able to answer a whole host of questions from Democrats and Republicans and several Republican senators. This isn't related to her nomination. It's related to the work she did before this, came up to me afterward and said how impressed they were by her. And that was, of course, before we got into the politics of the nomination process. But I think her experience is perfect for this. She has spent her entire 20-year career fighting for civil rights and equal justice under the law. She worked as an attorney in the criminal section of the Civil Rights Division, as the chair noted, in the George W. Bush administration, investigating and prosecuting a number of criminal cases. She also worked in the voting rights section and has handled those cases. Since 2016, she has been the president and executive director of the Lawyers Committee for Civil and Human Rights, one of the country's largest and most important national civil rights organizations. I've been involved in calls with her about various issues where she had lawyers from actually both political parties on the call, and I could see how she led this group. She spent years working to advance civil rights of all Americans. One former Deputy Assistant Attorney General for the DOJ Civil Rights Division, stated, if you were inventing a nominee from scratch, you'd come up with Kristen. She is thoughtful, she is dedicated, and she will do so much when it comes to the issues of our time. And as we get at some of these divides that we've had on some of these nominees, I'm going to focus just a bit on the counterpart of this. Trevor Potter, who previously served as a Republican commissioner and chairman of the Federal Election Commission, called her one of the foremost legal experts in the country on voting rights and described her as smart, honest, and deeply committed to equal justice under law. That is the former Republican chairman of the FEC. Trey Grayson, former Secretary of State from Kentucky, Republican, who served as chair of the Republican Association of Secretaries of State, sent a letter expressing his strong support for Ms. Clark. He noted her, quote, devotion to fairness, her commitment to the rule of law, and her unrelenting pursuit of ensuring that every voter is afforded the opportunity to vote. The Major Chiefs Association, representing police executives from the largest cities in the country, stated, Ms. Clark will be an effective leader and valuable partner for local law enforcement agencies. We have heard from former Assistant Attorney Generals of the Civil Rights Division who served in both Republican and Democratic administrations who wrote, we find Ms. Clark to be an excellent candidate from the standpoint of experience, temperament, and commitment to the rule of law to fill this most important law enforcement post. There just goes on in terms of debunking some of the claims that have made about her, but also wholeheartedly supporting her. So I know those letters are on the record from her hearing, but I hope people take them in the spirit of which they're meant, and I hope that she will be confirmed today, or sent to the floor today. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Klobuchar. Who's seeking recognition? Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to join, first of all, with our other colleagues in expressing condolences to Senator Klobuchar. I didn't know Senator Klobuchar's father, but I know his daughter, and on that basis alone, in addition to the other accolades that he's received, I know that he must have been an amazing man, and that he's proud of you, and I know how hard this can be to lose a parent, regardless of how old one is when one loses one's parent, or how old they are. It's hard. So my condolences go to you. Wanted to speak for a minute also regarding Ms. Clark. As I believe I mentioned it a few weeks ago, I'm not here to call into question Ms. Clark's motives or whether or not she's a good person. I'm willing to assume that her motives are good and that she's a good person. It's not my job as a U.S. Senator, and it's beyond my ability to look into those other things. But I do have serious concerns about some things that I see in her record. Concerns that, after I raised them, have not been met with a rebuttal, certainly not with an adequate refutation. First, given the importance of the division that she's been called to head and that we're considering having her lead, I'm worried that there have been past instances in which she's publicly pushed the Department of Justice to not pursue egregious instances of intimidation. For example, Ms. Clark criticized the Department of Justice decision to prosecute Ike Brown for voter intimidation and suppression. A reminder, in that case, a Mississippi Democratic official engaged in rampant vote manipulation and absentee ballot fraud was the issue. Rather than praising the Justice Department's successful prosecution in that case, she criticized the decision to prosecute it, stating that some of the claims were quote-unquote weak. Now, when asked point blank directly whether she agreed with the Department of Justice's decision to prosecute two members of the new Black Panther Party who showed up to a polling place wielding a billy club, she demurred,
saying, quote, "I believe the leadership of the Justice Department had the prerogative to bring the cases that it deemed appropriate to bring." It's a completely non-responsive answer. It's like saying that Congress has the prerogative to pass legislation, whatever legislation that it deems appropriate. In short, she was unwilling to decry what was outrageous and, in my view, clearly, patently unlawful and lawless voter suppression and intimidation when Democrats were implicated. She's shown no such hesitancy, however, in challenging common-sense election security laws, like voter identification requirements passed by state legislatures. Indeed, she's frequently challenged state election laws, attempting to paint ballot security measures as, in and of themselves, racially discriminatory. Now, those are serious accusations one makes against a duly enacted law by duly elected lawmakers in a state where a state has clear authority to enact laws setting election policy. Which raises the question, does Ms. Clark oppose all voter intimidation or just voter intimidation against certain groups? When the position the nominee is applying is one that involves being the head of the Civil Rights Division, it's not a question that you want to have to ask. Second, Ms. Clark has shown a troubling disregard towards certain constitutional rights. A few years ago, she decried the Trump administration's creation of a religious liberty task force, saying that the goal was, quote, "to make it easier for people to use religion to mask their discriminatory goals." And then she added the word "shameful." I'd remind Ms. Clark that the very first sentence of the Bill of Rights safeguards the very religious freedoms that she accuses of making of being there in order to make and mask discriminatory goals. And again, late last year, Ms. Clark attacked the Supreme Court's decision in Roman Catholic Diocese versus Cuomo, claiming that the court's ruling wrongly privileged religious freedom above all else. Now, that decision, to put it in context, did not do that. It simply stated that there is this common sense proposition, and it stated the proposition that government must treat mosques and synagogues and churches the same way that it treats liquor stores and acupuncture clinics. In other words, if you're going to allow a liquor store and an acupuncture clinic to go under one standard, you can't impose a different, more restrictive standard on houses of worship simply because they are religious institutions. That the Constitution plainly prohibits. So it's statements like these that give religious Americans like myself pause. It should give all Americans, whether they're religious or not, pause. Why should we believe that she'll defend the civil rights, including the religious rights of all Americans, and not just the ones with which she happens to agree? Finally, I'm worried that Ms. Clark's failure adequately to address her troubling history of irresponsible activism sends us another concerning signal. In college, she wrote an article stating that, quote, "melanin endows blacks with greater mental, physical, and spiritual abilities, something which cannot be measured based on Eurocentric standards," close quote. Now, when asked about this at the hearing, in various ways, in various formulations, through various members of this committee, she claimed that this was meant to be satirical, but at no point, either at the hearing or in follow-up questions for the record or otherwise, did she ever acknowledge the obvious, that these statements were unacceptable, regardless of whether she intended them to be satirical. Likewise, rather than express regret for her decision to participate and assist in a conference defending cop killers and domestic terrorists in law school, she merely said, "I provided logistical support This contradicts statements made by numerous speakers at the conference who personally thanked her for her efforts. None of this is unforgivable, of course. We've all said and done things that we later come to regret. But Ms. Clark, it's notable here, is asking us to apply a different standard to her than we've applied to others. In 2019, her name appeared on a letter sent by the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, where she sat on the board of directors opposing the nomination of Ryan Bounds. The letter stated that, quote, while Bounds recently apologized for those comments, the timing of that apology suggests it is one of convenience rather than remorse, offered in a last-ditch effort to salvage his nomination, close quote. Now, in her hearing testimony, she provided no explanation for why we should overlook her extraordinarily controversial statements and activities while she was a student. Rather, she attempted to minimize and evade her actions. We even asked her specifically about that comparison. There again, there was no effort to reconcile the two or explain how they were different or to differentiate this set of circumstances from those. Ms. Clark's history of actions and words that are troubling, unfortunately, didn't end with law school. In 2019, she signed a letter defending Tamika Mallory, a woman who stated that, quote, white Jews uphold white supremacy, close quote, and associated herself with Louis Farrakhan. When pressed on this statement, she gave no explanation for her statement of support, other than by saying that the letter denounced anti-Semitism. I'm confused. How exactly is it that a letter defending a woman accused of making anti-Semitic statements could actually be a letter denouncing anti-Semitism? I don't see it. Either anti-Semitism is bad or it's not. You can't eat your cake and have it too. And likewise, just last year, Ms. Clark wrote an article titled, I Prosecuted Police Killings, Defund the Police, but Be Strategic. That is the actual title, in direct quotes. When pressed about this by members of this committee, Ms. Clark once again sought to evade responsibility, stating that she has, quote, developed a practice of being deferential to editors on title selection, close quote. I'm not sure that's how this works. I don't think that's how taking responsibility for that works. The article did, in fact, have her name on it. Notably, I found it significant that she didn't say she had no choice in it, that she was utterly unaware of it, but rather that she showed deference. I'm not sure exactly what she means by this. And you can hardly blame the editor for the title that he or she chose, if in fact he or she chose the title. Ms. Clark wrote 3 times in the piece, in this article, quote, we must invest less in police, close quote. So in short, Ms. Clark's record reflects a consistent pattern of troubling statements and actions, followed by a disclaimer of responsibility and a lack of remorse. Moreover, her record gives reason to doubt that she'll defend the civil rights of all Americans and not just those she perceives to be her allies. And for these reasons, I can't support her nomination. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Lee. Any other members wishing to seek recognition on the nominations? Well, if not, the clerk will call the roll on Kristen M. Clark to be Assistant Attorney General for the Civil Rights Division.
Presumably, we can make statements afterwards.
I'm sorry.
Probably good to
I
get the
didn't-
vote going, right?
Members can make their comments after the vote if they wish, but I don't want to foreclose any member the opportunity to speak. All right?
I'd be happy to make my comments after the vote, Mr. Chairman.
No, don't vote.
So the
Mr. Chairman,
clerk-
I would like to make comments as well. It seems like Senator Hirono does. There may be others.
Senator Hirono
Mr. Chairman,
or Senator Blumenthal?
if we're going to have comments before the vote,
What do you mean?
I'd like to go before the vote, very briefly. I just want to respond very briefly to Senator Lee's comment about anti-Semitism. I hadn't anticipated talking on this point, but I think, as Merrick Garland said when he was here, I think I know anti-Semitism when I see it. I think this charge about anti-Semitism is just very regrettably false. Even to raise it is unfortunate. There's no basis for it in the record. In fact, I don't think there's an anti-Semitic bone in Ms. Clark's body, judging by her record and the support that she has from the National Council of Jewish Women, the Anti-Defamation League, the Union for Reform Judaism, 79 local, state, and national Jewish organizations. But more importantly, she's fought hatred. She's fought bias and bigotry, not only against members of the Jewish faith, but against Muslims and blacks and others. And because she has fought so vigorously for civil rights and liberties, and because she has been a prosecutor of unquestionable character and ability, I strongly support her nomination. I think that at the end of the day, all of these talking points, based on headlines of articles, based on smokescreen allegations, simply fall of their own weight. There's no basis in fact. The only reason to oppose her is the fear that she is going to be a vigorous and honest enforcer, as she has been throughout her career, enforcer of the law. And therefore, I strongly support her.
Mr. Chairman, since my name was raised, I want to point out, I am not accusing her of being anti-Semitic. My point was only to say that she has associated with those who are. She has associated herself and her name with those who are. That is independently troubling. I'm not saying that she herself is anti-Semitic, and it doesn't depend on that assertion, because that's not the assertion at all.
My understanding, Senator Cruz, did you seek recognition? No? Yes, you did.
Although I was behind Senator Hirono, so I'm happy to let her go first.
He's going back and forth.
I'm happy to go now as well, too.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The nominee before this committee is extreme, even in the spectrum of nominees this committee has considered. And Kristen Clark and Vanita Gupta, two nominees that have been before this committee in the past month, are two of the most radical nominees that have ever been put forward to any position in the federal government. It speaks volumes that President Biden is willing to nominate two radicals to be senior officials at the Department of Justice. And it speaks volumes that Senate Democrats are willing to rubber stamp those choices. Senate Democrats are fond of saying that they don't advocate abolishing the police. That's understandable. That's probably good politics. Their voters, most assuredly, don't support abolishing the police. It is only the radicals, it is only the extreme left that advocates abolishing the police. But today's proceedings and the proceedings of the past month have made clear that every single Democratic member of the United States Senate is now on record supporting abolishing the police. Why is that? Because every single Democrat voted to confirm Vanita Gupta. This week, Senator Blumenthal chaired a hearing on guns in which he and I had an exchange where I observed that every Democrat had voted for a nominee who had submitted written testimony advocating for abolishing the police. Senator Blumenthal, unfortunately, did what is now commonplace in so-called Senate debate, which is he simply stated things that were manifestly untrue. And Senator Blumenthal said, "As you well know, Senator Cruz, that is a complete distortion. We're here to talk about the nominees." So that was a complete distortion is that I said she had submitted written testimony to this body advocating abolishing the police. I have in front of me that written testimony that she submitted on June 18th, 2020, so less than a year ago, where in writing Ms. Gupta advocates abolishing the police, explicitly, unequivocally, with no wiggle room. And Mr. Chairman, with that, I'd ask unanimous consent to enter this testimony into the record today.
Without objection.
Now, in today's bizarre Twitter world, of course, what happened is all the lefty journalists immediately leapt on Senator Blumenthal's statement and said, see, he's proven it is a complete distortion because he said it. Facts are stubborn things. Ms. Gupta, in writing, less than a year ago, advocated to the U.S. Senate that the police should be abolished. Simply asserting that's not the case doesn't make it go away. There's a reason at her hearing, Ms. Gupta had to run away from her previous advocacy and say, I don't believe that now. Because less than a year ago, she advocated it. But, you know, this isn't a one-off. We have two nominees who have explicitly advocated abolishing the police. Now, Ms. Clark, June 11th, 2020, so less than a year ago, wrote an op-ed in Newsweek. The op-ed is entitled, I Prosecuted Police Killings. Defund the police, but be strategic. And, Mr. Chairman, I'd ask unanimous consent to enter this op-ed in the record as well. Now, Mr. Blumenthal said just a moment ago, well, it's the title of the op-ed. She didn't pick the title of the op-ed. Okay, fine. Except the title reflects exactly what is in the text that she wrote. And by the way, it's by Kristen Clark. Not by Kristen Clark and anybody else, just her. The second paragraph of her op-ed begins, into that space has surged a unifying call from the Black Lives Matter movement, defund the police. Now, my colleagues, you cannot argue that someone doesn't want to defund the police when they describe the unifying call from Black Lives Matter, defund the police. But you say, what does that mean? Well, the next paragraph, Ms. Clark elaborates. Among activists and local governments, the meaning of defund the police ranges from reining in municipal police budgets to complete police abolition. For example, the majority of the Minneapolis City Council pledged to dismantle their police force. We then have later in the op-ed 3 consecutive paragraphs that begin with, we must invest less in police and more in social workers. Next paragraph, we must invest less in police and more in social supports in our schools. Next paragraph, we must invest less in police and more in mental health aid. The entire op-ed advocates for abolishing the police. Our Democratic senators are getting ready to vote for her to put her in one of the senior positions of the Department of Justice. And she and Ms. Gupta are 2 of the leading advocates in the country for abolishing the police. And we're not in Alice in Wonderland through the looking glass, where we simply assert things that are not. They have said it in writing repeatedly. You can't pretend it doesn't exist, nor do I believe Democratic members of this body can pretend they don't support the positions they are voting for. I can tell you under no circumstances would I vote to confirm a senior official at the Department of Justice who had vocally, vigorously, and recently advocated abolishing the police. And by the way, with Ms. Clark, this is not a new passion of hers. She has spent her life on the extreme left wing. When she was a student at Columbia, she helped organize a conference on the left, and I have in front of me an article from FoxNews.com dated April 9th, 2021, the title of which is New Findings Show Biden DOJ Nominee Organized Conference Championing Cop Killers. And Mr. Chairman, I'd ask unanimous consent to enter this article in the record as well.
Without objection.
This article goes through transcripts from the hearing, from the conference, rather, that she organized. The conference was entitled, quote, Racing Justice, and it featured speakers defending, celebrating, and lionizing one after the other cop killers, people who had murdered police officers, describing them as political prisoners. Convicted cop killer Mumia Abu-Jabal convicted cop killer Mutula Shakur, convicted cop killer Sundiata Akoli, and Tom Manning. Not only that, they also referred to as a political prisoner Susan Rosenberg, who was convicted of transporting multiple illegal firearms and over 740 pounds of explosives. Ms. Rosenberg was also a member of the American Communist Terrorist Group, the May 19th communist organization that bombed the United States Capitol on November 7th, 1983. We've heard lots of Democratic members of this body speaking in high dudgeon about the terrorist attack that all of us experienced on January 6th of this year. And yet, Ms. Rosenberg actually carried out a communist attack that bombed the United States Capitol. And what did Ms. Clark do? Organize a conference celebrating someone who bombed the United States Capitol as a political prisoner. That's extreme. That's radical. By the way, I will point out, Mr. Blumenthal spoke just a moment ago about anti-Semitism. At that same conference, one of these radical speakers downplayed and diminished the Holocaust in her remarks, saying, quote, "It was only 6 million Jews killed in the camps and prisons of Germany and Poland." That's reprehensible. That's the kind of vicious anti-Semitism, sadly, we see on the extreme left and the extreme right. But Ms. Clark organized that conference. Those one of the speakers at her conference. And if you say, well, maybe those are not her views. I have in front of me an email she sent on June 25th, 1999. It says, I'm going to read in relevant part, "Whoever thinks chattel slavery is gone is not with us in the real world. Some aspects of it have changed, like cars, modernized for the times. The old chains are now less visible, fitted by the media and schools and laws. The plantations are called plants or factories, or whatever they call the myriad squalid money-making machines in which the rulers exploit black people and the whole working class. The Klan is now the police, with blue uniforms replacing the sheets and hoods. The corrupt, racist judges are petty Klan administrators. The Kliegels of the bourgeois state, Klavan."
Senator, before you arrived this morning, we asked members to try to confine their remarks to 10 minutes, and virtually all of
I'm nearing the end of my
agreed to that
remarks,
standard.
and I recognize the last time we had a hearing, the chairman broke the rules and violated the rules of this committee to try
don't
to
want to do
silence
that,
speaking.
but I want you to
And
show-
I understand why you interrupt me in the middle of this email, because it is so extreme
I'm
that
sure
I
you don't-
recognize, Mr. Chairman, you don't want the American people to hear what's in this email.
I have, without objection, put into record everything you've asked. I'm not afraid of what you're going to say. I'm just wondering if it's going to come to an end soon.
It's going to come to an end soon. It would have been sooner without the interruption, but it will come to an end soon. And now that we're at it, I would ask unanimous consent to enter this email into the record.
Without objection.
So what I was reading when the chairman interrupted me, the corrupt, racist judges are petty Klan administrators. The Kliegels of the bourgeois state's Klavan, their courts. The midnight torch-burning torture sessions before the neck-stretching and black corpse burning. To each of my Democratic colleagues on this committee, Ms. Clark, in writing, said, I want to read the sentence that on this copy is highlighted. "The Klan is now the police, with blue uniforms replacing the sheets and hoods. You do not get to pretend you are defenders of law enforcement when you vote to confirm someone who describes police officers as the Klan and who has advocated repeatedly in writing for abolishing the police. This is radical, this is extreme, and the Democratic senators on this committee know that, and yet you are giving in to the crazy, angry left in your party. I ask you to pull back. I ask you to think of what your constituents want. how many of your constituents agree with this statement. And to each of you, I suggest be prepared when you return home. The people of Illinois do not agree with the statement, the Klan is now the police, with blue uniforms replacing the sheets and hoods. And this committee should not confirm someone who said such a thing to be a senior official at the Department of Justice.
Senator Rono. Senator Blumenthal.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to respond because the senator from Texas has again mischaracterized Ms. Clark's actual statement. I said that he distorted it when he referred to it in a previous subcommittee meeting. His characterization now is even more of a distortion, used solely to attack the Democratic members of this committee. But I assume
Mr. Blumenthal, what's
that my
the distortion?
colleagues will review her record, including her explanation to us in the hearing that she attended, and will know what her views are now, what she meant in that article that's been cited, and in fact, in the plain language of that article. And I know that they will disregard his distortions of her record. Thank you.
Senator Blumenthal, if I could ask you, what is the distortion? I read verbatim from her op-ed. I read it out loud. Was one word or one syllable of what I read inaccurate? And if it's not, you can't simply say, this isn't true with no facts. Here's the op-ed. Find me
She
a
is not in
sentence to the
favor
contrary.
of abolishing the police in the United States of America.
That's what she says in writing.
She has made clear to us in her testimony under oath.
But hold on a second. What you said is it was a distortion to say she advocated in writing abolishing the police. That is objectively true. The words are here. I invite you to read any portion of this and come to the contrary. That's what she said. Now, what you're saying now, because you realized claiming it was a distortion is untenable, the facts are not with you, now you say, well, today she doesn't support abolishing the police. She did last year, but she doesn't today. Perhaps you're right. She testified. Both she and Ms. Gupta ran away from their written testimony last year and claim they have different views today. So you can claim that. I find myself quite skeptical of the late night conversion, but you cannot claim, as you did this week in the subcommittee hearing, as you just did here, what am I distorting? Are these not her actual words that I'm reading verbatim, word for word?
A fair reading
What is unfair?
that document simply doesn't support
Senator
your
Blumenthal,
distortion.
can I
But I don't
ask you
want
to
to prolong
suspend?
this discussion.
Unfavorably reporting the nomination of Kristen M. Clark to be Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights Division, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Leahy.
Aye.
Mrs. Feinstein. Mr. Whitehouse.
Aye.
Ms. Klobuchar.
Aye.
Mr. Coon.
Aye.
Mr. Blumenthal.
Aye.
Ms. Hirono. Aye. Mr. Booker.
Aye.
Mr. Padilla.
Aye.
Mr. Ossoff.
Aye.
Mr. Grassley.
No.
Mr. Graham.
No by proxy.
Mr. Cornyn.
No.
Mr. Lee.
No by proxy.
Mr. Cruz. Mr. Sass.
No by proxy.
Mr. Hawley. Mr. Cotton.
Maybe it's in here.
Mr. Kennedy.
No by proxy.
Nope,
Mr. Tillis.
better get him right now.
Mrs. Blackburn.
No by proxy.
Chair Durbin.
Aye.
In this vote, there are 11 ayes and 11 nays.
Committee's recorded a tie vote on Kristen Clark's nomination to be Assistant Attorney General for the Civil Rights Division pursuant to Section 3, subsection 1A of the Senate Resolution 27 of the 117th Congress. I'll transmit to the Secretary of the Senate a notice of this tie vote. Under Section 3, Section 1B of that resolution, either majority or minority leader may then make a motion to discharge the nomination. And now on favorably reporting the nomination of Todd Kim to be the Assistant Attorney General for the Environment and Natural Resources Division, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Leahy.
Aye.
Mrs. Feinstein. Aye. Mr. Whitehouse.
Aye.
Ms. Klobuchar.
Aye.
Mr. Coon.
Aye.
Mr. Blumenthal. Aye. Ms. Hirono. Mr. Booker.
Aye.
Mr. Padilla.
Aye.
Mr. Ossoff. Aye. Mr. Grassley.
Aye.
Mr. Graham.
Aye by proxy.
Mr. Cornyn. Mr. Lee.
No by proxy.
Mr. Cruz. No. Mr. Sass.
No by proxy.
Mr. Hawley. No. Mr. Cotton. No. Mr. Kennedy.
No by proxy.
Mr. Tillis. Aye. Mrs. Blackburn.
No by proxy.
Chair Durbin.
Aye.
In this vote, the ayes are 15, the nays are 7.
The nomination will be favorably voted to the floor. Now we move to the four bills on today's agenda. The first bill is S-228, the Merger Filing Fee Modernization Act. This bipartisan bill would update the pre-merger filing fees that companies pay for merger reviews by the antitrust regulators and the FTC and the DOJ. I would ask Senator Klobuchar and Senator Grassley if they wish to make any further comments.
I'll put my comment in the record.
Excellent. I'll just be very brief. This is a very, very important bill because it is bipartisan, and the issue here is that these fees, as Senator Grassley has said often, haven't been updated since 2001, and it's the filing fees for mergers. And right now we have, under the previous administration, actually, they took on some major cases, which I commended, against Facebook and Google, and that's going to take a lot of people to do that. They also have other antitrust cases. Many of you have talked to me about the consolidation in so many areas, and yet when you actually look at the number of lawyers that have worked there, they have significantly less than, say, when Ronald Reagan was president, because of the way these fees have worked and other issues. In 1980, the antitrust division, when they broke up AT&T, had 453 lawyers. As of April 2021, that number is at 299 lawyers. The FTC had 1,719 employees in 1980. As of yesterday, it had 1,120. And you just cannot take on the biggest companies in the world with duct tape and Band-Aids. And we all know that they actually often are profit centers. They bring in, because of the filing fees, significant money and actually over their budget to the federal government. And so I commend all of the members who are interested in these issues. We know that many of us want to get moving on some of these tech issues, and whether it's related to ag, whether it's related to consolidation in the pharmaceutical industry, but we're going to need the resources to do it. And what's interesting about the bill, and why I think Senator Grassley and others have been strong supporters of it, is that we actually decrease the merger fees on the smaller mergers and the smaller companies quite significantly for them, and we increase it on the big mega mergers. And none of this is taxpayer money. And for these big companies, the over $5 billion mergers, it is a drop in the bucket compared to all the lawyers' fees and everything else they're paying for these mergers. So that's the bill, and I've really appreciated Senator Grassley's support for it, as well as other members. And I want to thank everyone for caring about antitrust and trying to make it cool again. And I note that several have written on this topic. I'm looking at one of them right now. So thank you very much.
If no senator seeks recognition or is prepared to offer minutes, Senator Hawley.
Can we just a very brief comment? I want to thank Senator Klobuchar for her important work on this, and I'm going to support this legislation today. I just wanted to note my continuing concern with the FTC and, frankly, the Antitrust Division and their performance, their track record over now a couple of decades, which I think has been quite lacking, and to point out that in the last 10 years or so, much of the most important work in the antitrust space has been done by the state attorneys general. And so I wonder if we ought not to be directing more attention and perhaps resources, making resources available to the state attorneys general. So I'm supportive of this legislation, but I want to register again, as I have many times before this committee, my deep concern about the FTC's performance, in particular in the last decade, particularly as it relates to the biggest technology companies, but frankly, all of these giant corporations that the FTC has looked the other way on time and time again. Google is a glaring, glaring example. So I support giving them more resources, but I think we've also got to think seriously about supporting other law enforcement entities like the state attorneys general in their work on this important topic. But thank you, Senator Klobuchar. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Does any other senator seek recognition
Mr. Chairman.
or offer an amendment? Senator Cruz.
Mr. Chairman, I want to agree with the comments of Senator Hawley and say in particular that we are living in a new Gilded Age where the oligarchs in Silicon Valley are the robber barons of this century. And I am quite disappointed by the lax antitrust enforcement we saw in the previous administration, both the Federal Trade Commission and the Department of Justice, that have ignored or been far too forgiving of the monopolists in Silicon Valley, a handful of billionaires who now bestride our information world and political discourse like colossuses, seemingly unable and unwilling to be checked by the requirements of federal law. And so I'm hopeful with this new administration. Democrats have historically been more vigorous on antitrust than Republicans. And so perhaps that instinct, which at times can be harmful, will be positively directed towards the monopolist we have in Silicon Valley. I will note also that Senator Klobuchar just wrote a massive new book on antitrust, which yesterday she came over and told me, I sent that antitrust book to you. And I was like, oh, someone wrote a book on antitrust. And I had no idea it was her book until I saw it a few minutes later. And it's something like 650 pages. I will say I read on Amazon the opening paragraphs of the introduction, and it was actually quite delightful, which has never been written or said about any antitrust book in the history of the law. So I commend Senator Klobuchar for that. I do want to ask a question about this bill. I am open to the idea of raising the fees for giant multi-billion-dollar corporations for mergers. I am concerned about raising the fees for smaller firms. And so I wanted to, I'm reading the text of the bill, but it's one of those bills that says replace this number with that number, replace this number with that number, and it's not immediately apparent to me which number is being replaced with what. So my question, Senator Klobuchar, is what is the effect of this bill for smaller firms, not the giant behemoths, but smaller firms that are seeking antitrust review?
Sure, of course. So for mergers that are less than $161 million, the old fee was $45,000. The new fee will be $30,000. For mergers that are less than $500 million, the old fee was $125,000. The new fee is $100,000. This was very important to Senator Grassley. For mergers between less than $1 billion, the new fee was somewhere between $125,000, $280,000. The new fee is in the middle at $250,000. For mergers that are between $1 billion, think of how big that is, and $2 billion, the merger fees are $280,000, the old ones, the new ones $400,000. And then at the top of the scale, the $5 billion plus deals, which tend to be a lot of the tech companies, go from $280,000 to $2,250,000. And again, it sounds like a lot, but when, and I know that Senator Hawley knows this from the work that he's done, they hire so many lawyers and so many consultants. This is literally a drop in the bucket compared to the rewards these lawyers get at the end if the deal goes through. And yet we're supposed to be able to examine all of their books. And Macon Delrahim, the former antitrust head under the Trump administration, is strongly in support of this bill because of that. He knows how hard it is to take them on.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Thank you.
So if there are no amendments, no one wishing to seek recognition, we will vote on final passage of this bill. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the bill will be favorably reported to the floor. It has been a tradition of this Senate Judiciary Committee, and I don't know how long, but a long, long time, that during Police Week we try to set aside measures that are bipartisan in nature and consistent with our high regard for those men and women who serve us in uniform in law enforcement. And this year and this committee will do nothing less. The first of these bills is 1511, the Protecting America's First Responders Act, co-sponsored by Senator Grassley, Gillibrand, Blackburn, Whitehouse, Klobuchar, Tillis, Blumenthal, Leahy, Hirono, Coons, and I ask, without objection, I be added as a co-sponsor. Bipartisan bill that would improve death and disability benefits for first responders. Senator Grassley, do you want to say anything more about it?
Put my name in the record so we can move along.
Good. Any senators seek recognition on this measure? If not, all those in favor of the passage of the bill say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Depending the chair, the ayes have it. The bill will be favorably reported to the floor. Next up is Senate 921, the Jaime Zapata and Victor Avila Federal Law Enforcement Protection Act. Co-sponsors include Senator Cornyn, Coons, Grassley, Leahy, Cotton, Whitehouse, Hawley, and Tillis. Without objection, I'd like to add myself as a co-sponsor. The bill is named for Department of Homeland Security Special Agents Jaime Zapata and Victor Avila, who were attacked by drug cartels in Mexico in February 2011. Sadly, Special Agent Zapata died. The individuals responsible were apprehended and tried. However, in an opinion by D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, they vacated the federal murder convictions due to a misreading of the law's application beyond our borders. This bill would clarify Congress's intent that federal officers and employees serving outside U.S. borders are protected by our federal criminal laws and ensure justice is served for federal officers defending our country wherever in the world they may be. I understand there's a bipartisan manager's amendment. Does anyone know about the manager's amendment? It says there's a bipartisan manager's amendment.
There is, without objection.
Without objection, it will be adopted. Anyone wish to speak or offer
Chairman.
another one? Senator Cornyn, of course.
Just briefly, Mr. Chairman, thank you for co-sponsoring the bill and for bringing this up for consideration today. You recited the facts well, and I won't repeat those, but you can imagine what the families of Mr. Avila and the Zapata family felt when they read one headline in a newspaper that said an ICE agent was killed overseas, but his killing is not a crime under U.S. law. That is not the message we want to send to the cartels. This bill, as you noted, closes that loophole and states unequivocally that if our enemies or criminal organizations or anybody kills, murders, assaults, or retaliates against a family member serving abroad, we will prosecute them to the fullest extent of the law. This bill closes the jurisdictional loophole to ensure that we can bring murderers like the cartel members who took Mr. Zapata's life to justice. So I'm pleased to stand with my colleagues today and send the message to the thousands of men and women serving our country in law enforcement with distinction, whether it's law enforcement officers, diplomats, civil servants, or others protecting and serving our country abroad. The message we are sending today is we've got your back. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Cornyn, and it's an honor to join you in co-sponsoring this legislation. If there are no more...
Chairman Durbin, if I might.
Senator Cruz?
I'd ask unanimous consent that I be added as a co-sponsor as well.
Without objection. Senator Coons as well. Anyone else?
Could I-
Senator Feinstein?
A brief comment.
Senator Coons?
Thank you, Chairman Durbin. I just want to thank Chairman Durbin and Ranking Member Grassley for moving these three bipartisan common sense bills. I want to thank Senator Cornyn for working with me on this particular piece of legislation. The chairman ably recited the key facts, but I think it's critical that given the number of folks in our federal law enforcement, foreign service, folks who serve us overseas who are at risk, they need to know that we've taken the step to fix this hole and to make it clear that an attack on any one of our public servants is an attack on us all, whether it happens here in the United States or around the world. So I look forward to working together to move this bill to enactment, and I'm grateful that we're getting these three good common sense bills done during Police Week. Thank you.
And without objection, Senator Blumenthal wishes to be added as co-sponsor. If there are no more amendments, we'll vote on final passage. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The clerk will report this bill favorably to the floor. Next up is S-1502, the Cops Counseling Act, sponsored by Senators Cortez Masto, Grassley, Leahy, Tillis, and Coons, and without objection, I'd like to add myself as a co-sponsor to this legislation. And here's what it does. It would ensure privacy protection for officers seeking assistance from peer counseling programs. These programs provide important mental health services to law enforcement and first responders, but may be underutilized because of confidentiality concerns. This bill protects confidentiality by prohibiting individuals who participate in peer counseling sessions from disclosing communications made during the sessions, with a few limited exceptions. This will help officers be mindful of their own mental health so they can safely serve us all. I understand there's a bipartisan manager's amendment. I appreciate Ranking Member Grassley and Senator Cortez Masto working with my staff to make some changes. Without objection, the manager's amendment will be adopted. Does any senator seek recognition or wish to offer an amendment?
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Cruz.
Mr. Chairman, I call up Amendment DUN 21343. This amendment is straightforward. It simply adds to the end of this bill a sense of Congress that, quote, federal, state, local, and tribal police officers, sheriffs, and other law enforcement officers across the United States serve with valor, dignity, and integrity. Now, if this language is familiar to members of the committee, there should be a reason for it, because every member of the committee has voted for this exact language multiple times. Indeed, this exact language was included at the beginning of the Police Week resolutions that the Senate has passed for at least the last 5 years. So for those of us who have served the last 5 years, all of us have voted for this language, not once, not twice, not 3 times or 4 times. 5 different times we voted for this language. This year's resolution for Police Week, unfortunately, deleted that language at the insistence of Democratic senators. Instead, it acknowledges the valor, dignity, and integrity, but only of those officers who died in the course of duty. So apparently, those officers who have not been killed in the course of duty, something has changed, and the Senate does not want to acknowledge their valor, dignity, and integrity. Given that this committee just voted to confirm a nominee to the Department of Justice who has said in writing, the Klan is now the police with blue uniforms replacing the sheets and hoods, I don't think it's an accident that that language was deleted from this week's Police Week resolution. We ought to be able to recognize that the vast majority of men and women serving in law enforcement are, as the Senate has said each year for the last 5 years, serving with valor, dignity, and integrity, and I would urge the committee to adopt this amendment.
Anyone wish to
Yes.
be recognized?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I yield to the ranking member always.
Yeah, thank you. I'm kind of in a bad position on this because I supported the original language that was, that Senator Cruz has talked about, but I wanted to make sure that we had a very strong bipartisan support for this language. So I've worked out with Senator Durbin in consultation with police groups and members of this committee. We did make a change in order to gain more bipartisan support. I understand that Senator Cruz would have preferred the language that he's talking about, and I have no problem with that language, but I've made an agreement to issue the Police Week resolution as it currently stands, and I don't think it'd be right for me to vote in favor of the original language. I also don't think that this amendment's necessary to improve the underlying bill. I respectfully then intend to vote no. It's not because I don't understand Senator Cruz's disappointment about the change, and it isn't because I disagree with the words of his amendment. I think those who know me know that I stand by my commitments, and I hope after the vote on this amendment, we can move on to the bill and work together to get it done. Because I think this being Police Week, whatever we can do in a very strong bipartisan way needs to be done.
I think Senator Booker.
Thank you. Thank you for the recognition. I hope that folks hold on to their seats for a second, but I agree with Ted Cruz. I'll say that again. I agree, damn it, with Ted Cruz. He just said...
That's going to be used in ads against you, Corey.
I know that, but it was a risk I'm going to take. I'm going to walk out on that limb. Ted and I, Senator Cruz, excuse me, and I both understand that across this country, every single day, there are officers that show extraordinary valor, courage, really the highest calling, and the faith that Senator Cruz and I share. There's no greater love than a man has than to give his life for others. I was a mayor over a police department, and I saw every single day the power of my officers and their willingness to put themselves at risk. And we should be not stripping a paragraph that is really not that objectionable. You said the words vast majority of police officers. You and I both agree. You can get any group of 100 people, and there's going to be a bad apple amongst them. We have 100 senators. I'm sure somewhere there's a bad apple amongst 100 of us. But the majority of senators are in this job because they want to make America a better place. So I agree with your words, vast majority. I'm wondering, with humility and grace, would the senator accept one word placed in this that I hope would help to bridge any concerns that people on my side of the aisle have with the affirmative statements that I agree with that Senator Cruz is saying, because I know that there are families right now who are grieving, as you and I both know, the tragic loss of their family members who were killed by a police officer like Derek Chauvin. And we know that there are officers out there, as there are in every group, that might be not doing the kind of valor and honor and integrity that the most officers, the vast majority of officers, 99% of officers, may be showing. And so my request is, I think you're right, Senator Cruz, we should put this back in. And my request would be that it could read instead with one three-letter word into it, in the sense of Congress. It is the sense of Congress that federal, state, local, and tribal police officers, the very police officers, this is not in it, but that saved our lives when terrorists attacked the Capitol and sought to kill people here. But it is the sense of Congress that federal, state, local, and tribal police officers, sheriffs, and other law enforcement officers across the United States who serve with valor, dignity, and integrity deserve the gratitude and respect of Congress. The word I added there was the word who, serve with valor, dignity, integrity, deserve the gratitude. I think that would solve this and affirm all the rightful sentiments that you expressed as you use the word vast majority there, sir.
Well, Senator Booker, I appreciate that suggestion, and I think that is a positive and constructive suggestion, and so I would accept that as a friendly amendment.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
Hey, are you
So, for the record, so it's clear, the language suggested by Senator Booker, the addition of the word who, is in the nature of a second-degree amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. There's no opposition to it, and the second-degree amendment is accepted. On the amendment as amended, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The amendment is agreed to. So if there are no further amendments or recognition sought, Senator Kennedy, you were seeking recognition.
I passed, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So we'll vote on final passage. All those in favor of S 1502 say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The opinion of the chair, the bill will be favorably reported to the floor, and if no one else seeks recognition.
Mr. Chairman, can I be added as a co-sponsor to S228, S1511, and S1502?
Without objection.
I got letters to put in the record on this last.
Without objection, that will be placed in the record.
Mr. Chairman?
Senator Ossoff.
I request similarly that without objection I be added as a co-sponsor to S1502.
Without objection, so ordered. No further business to come before the Senate Judiciary Committee. It stands adjourned.